Hi, it's Loren Lockman from the Tanglewood Wellness Center in Costa Rica, and I've been asked this morning to talk a little bit about how do we get nutrition while we're fasting. We've got a group of people here fasting that some haven't eaten for, well, some didn't eat. They're already eating again, but didn't eat for 40 days. Another one here, 20. We've got someone who's breaking a 25-day fast tomorrow, and some shorter fasts as well. But we can't go 6 weeks without nutrition. So how do we get the nutrients our bodies need when we're consuming only pure water? And let me clarify, for anyone will think, well, that's why we should drink juices or coconut water or take supplements while fasting. It's really critically important to understand that fasting means the complete abstinence from all nutriment, which means calories and nutrients. You can take supplements or drink coconut water or drink juices while you're fasting, but you won't get the benefits of fasting because you're not actually fasting. If you're drinking juices or coconut water, you are consuming liquid food. It contains calories, it contains nutrients, it's food. Now in the case of the juices, it's unnatural food. It's not food that exists in nature. It's not something I recommend really consuming. I'll drink an occasional glass of juice, but I don't do it thinking I'm doing something healthy for myself. The healthiest thing to do is always to consume the whole foods. But when we're fasting, we can't do that. So how can we go 1 to 6 weeks consuming nothing but pure water? Well, to be honest with you, I don't know that there's a definitive answer to this question, as strange as that may seem. I've been fasting people now for 18 years. I've fasted dozens of times myself. Here's what's true. What's true is that we frequently see people who begin fasts with nutrient deficiencies, correct them while fasting. Well, how's that possible? I think the only thing I've been thinking about this now for 20 years, the only thing that occurs to me is that the nutrients that we were deficient in must have already been in the body, but somehow not available, somehow not being accessed by the body. So one answer to the question, how do we get our nutrition while fasting, is that the nutrition's already in the body, and fasting allows the body to have access to what it didn't have access to before. And so we have seen magnesium, potassium, iron, B12, and many other nutrient deficiencies corrected while people are fasting. One way, perhaps the nutrients were already there. Now remember, when we're fasting, some people say that fasting is starving, but it's not. They're two different things. When we're fasting, we're living on our reserves. And we do have some nutrients in those reserves. But the truth is, most of our vitamins are water-soluble vitamins. The ones we would expect to have in the fat reserves would be fat-soluble vitamins. How do we get all the water-soluble vitamins? The answer is, I don't really know for sure, but we do. In fact, as crazy as it sounds, now you guys, you weren't here for this discussion, maybe I did mention this recently, but the longest fast I've ever supervised was a young man last year in England who fasted 18 weeks. 18 weeks. Now, 18 weeks is 4.5 months, roughly. Okay? You can go about 3 months without consuming vitamin C, a maximum of 3 months without consuming vitamin C, before you develop scurvy. Okay? You can go a maximum of a few months without B vitamins before you develop beri-beri. You're going to develop deficiency diseases if you're eating, but not eating well. You're going to develop problems. Okay? Which is why I recently did a video about mono diets, why I think it's a mistake to eat any one thing for 3 or 4 weeks or months at a time, because there is no one food that contains all the nutrition that we need. So we have a varied diet. It doesn't have to be a dramatically varied diet. I said this morning, I live on 5 or 6 things most of the time, right? That's enough. But no one thing's going to do it. So we can't eat food. If I was eating only food that contained no vitamin C, by September, I would have scurvy. And yet there are many documented cases of people going 5-6 months and even longer fasting, and these were obviously very large people who had lots of reserves, but there are very many documented cases of people going 5 or 6 months, and not one single case of someone developing a deficiency disease, even though if you were eating, you couldn't possibly do that. So it's been postulated that while we're fasting, our body's needs for nutrients is essentially zero. Now, I can't vouch for that. I don't really know, and I don't know that anyone does. But I do know that we don't develop deficiency diseases. We correct existing deficiencies almost every time, by the way. This is not a rare thing. This is a typical thing. Is it going to happen every single time? I'm not saying that. Is it, if you're sitting there with an iron or potassium deficiency, it may not be safe for you to fast, especially not without experienced supervision, because you're already dealing with a difficult situation. But I fasted people who are iron deficient, anemic, and we've corrected the anemia. So bottom line is, I think there's two possibilities. One is somehow, somewhere in the body, all the nutrients we need are there most of the time, or that we simply stop needing nutrients at all when we're fasting. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a combination of the two. Maybe it's one or the other. Maybe there's some other factor that I'm not aware of at all. But in almost no case do we run into nutrient problems. So the water-soluble nutrients, we're going to pee out of the system theoretically. If we have more than we need, we just pee them out. Theoretically, with water-soluble nutrients, that should never be a concern. But it does bring up a question, well, how much of this stuff do we have on hand if we're not holding on to it? The answer is, somehow, in almost every case, enough. The nutrients that most people are concerned about over-consuming are typically fat-soluble nutrients because the body will store them. So if you eat too many, they can become toxic. And it's an important point, because there are things that we need, but in excess aren't good for us, and this is another reason why supplements are problematic, because we're not getting normal quantities of the nutrients we need. But theoretically, it's only in the fat, only fat-soluble nutrients would be found. Now, it is possible that we have circulating in our bloodstream at any given time many water-soluble nutrients, enough that we're theoretically fine if our nutrient needs are very, very small, as I'm suspecting they are. And as I began to say a moment ago, we have seen in roughly 18 years, nearly 18 years, we've seen one person develop a deficiency condition that I was aware of. Now, were there others? Yeah, it's entirely possible. I mean, any one of you could have a subclinical deficiency. What does that mean? It means your levels, your serum levels of some nutrient might be below what medicine says is okay. But if it's not creating a problem, we don't need to worry about that, especially now that we're filling back up the coffers by eating, and eating optimally with all the foods that are loaded with nutrients, the easiest things possible to digest. But in all the years fasting with more than 2,000 or 2,300 people, we've only seen one situation where someone actually became deficient enough there was a problem. And hers was a case where her thyroid gland had been surgically removed more than 50 years earlier. Now, the thyroid gland regulates your sodium and potassium. So guess what? If you don't have a thyroid gland, you better be taking thyroid hormone. She had decided a month before she came, I'm just going to stop taking my thyroid hormone. Now, it was not on my suggestion, it was not on my approval. My direct written recommendation to her was, you must continue taking thyroid hormone every single day because you can't make any. We need it every day, and if you can't make it, you have to take it. Okay, we don't have people taking drugs while fasting, but hormones are different. If your body doesn't make them anymore, you're going to need to take that. She had stopped taking it. When I contacted her twin sister, who was a doctor in California, to tell her what happened, it was the third time she'd been hospitalized for a sodium potassium imbalance because she had decided on her own to stop taking thyroid hormones. Okay? So it's very, very unusual and unlikely. And as I mentioned in a video I just posted this morning, if you understand what to look for, it's very unlikely that we're going to have people getting into trouble. Because, for instance, when someone moves into hyponatremia, which is low sodium, It's obvious if you know what to see, what to look for. I do. Low potassium. It's obvious. I saw her and said, I'm taking you to the hospital. Okay, this is an issue. All right? So it's very, very unusual that we're going to see nutrient deficiencies. But how we get our nutrients, it's a mystery. I'm only guessing. So I hope that's been helpful to you. I'll see you next time.